Israel is at war, and the nations that surround her appear to be destabilizing. Many people are asking the question of who's going to win. And in this video, I'm going to answer that question, and you'll be surprised at who it is that's actually fighting. Folks, let's have a heart-to-heart here and have a real conversation about a very real issue that has been in front of us. Now, I think you all know what has been happening in the last week and a half with Israel being at war and the insanity that has happened with Hamas being led by, of course, Islamic fundamentalists that choose to do what the fundamentals of the Quran teach them to do. Now, I'm going to leave that be because there's a lot of room for people to argue about a lot of things and who hurt who and what happened here and what happened there. And the reality of it is Hamas did what the Quran tells them to do and what their charter tells them to do. Now, I'm going to go somewhere with this because of all of you people that are saying, what about the Palestinians? And there's not a lot of you people doing that, but I do think we should have a conversation about the Palestinians. And I think it's important, and I hope that I'm going to give you some perspective with this, right? But when you look at what happened, these folks, look at the charter. We've talked about the charter of Hamas. We talked about that yesterday, specifically Saturday. And I read to you some excerpts on what was read in that charter, right? They say this. They say the Islamic resistance movement is a distinguished Palestinian movement whose allegiance is to Allah and whose way of life is Islam. It strives to raise the banner of Allah over every inch of Palestine. And eventually they say over every inch of the world. Now, in their preamble, they say Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it, okay? So this is not just an anti-Israel issue. This is an anti-God thing, and make no mistake about it, it's getting uglier and uglier and uglier by the moment. We know that for sure. Now, I know that there's a lot of people that'll come to me and say, James, what about the Palestinian population? What about the Arab population? And I will just simply tell you this. Nobody wins when war happens, okay? Let me just explain that. Nobody wins. Now, someone will win this, okay? And I'm going to talk about who wins in a minute. And Israel might not be the answer you're going to hear, even though I can tell you this right now. God's not going to let Israel fall apart, okay? We understand that. The book of Jeremiah says, hey, look at the sky. Look at the sun, look at the stars. When they're gone, that's when I'll forsake Israel forever, and that's not going to happen. So the reality of it is Israel's not going anywhere, but we look at the things that are happening and we look at this crazy, barbaric kind of nonsense that's been happening in the Middle East and all the craziness that goes with it. We are watching lots of people's lives just completely be obliterated by these evil, wicked, satanic, and demonic ideals that have satanically inspired the hearts of very evil men. Now, we know what's going on. Listen, there are some people that are even denying it. I think the thing that shocked me more than even the way that this attack actually went down is how many insanely anti-Semitic people have been commenting when I've been making these videos, or how many people have been talking very blindly about the Palestinians, say, we want to support the Palestinian people and forget Israel, let's destroy Israel. When anybody who says that obviously has no understanding or realization of what's actually really going on and what's taking place. Look, let me make myself very clear here, okay? Hamas is to the Palestinians what Black Lives Matter is to black people, okay? They claim to want to make a better life for Palestinians. They claim to want to make a better life for Arabs, but what they're doing is they're destroying lives because they are implementing the ideals, the thoughts, the philosophies, and the teachings of the Quran, which continues to destroy lives because the idea is kill and be killed for the sake of dominance, bi'isma Allah, in the name of Allah. I'm going to make myself very clear. Now, I want to say something because there's an issue that a lot of people are raising about all of the people that are Israeli that are ungodly, okay? Well, that's a tragedy. It's terrible, and we don't like it. We don't like to see people turn their hearts away from the Lord, especially when they're turning their hearts away from the God of their fathers. By the way, let me just simply say this. The Palestinian population, or let me better phrase it, the Arab population that has turned their back on the true and living God for the ideals of a lying God, Allah to be specific, understand something. They also came from Abraham. God gave Abraham a promise even for the Ishmaelites, and that's where the Arabs came from. Yet the problem is all of them have forsaken the true and living God. All of them have walked away from the biblical and spiritual truths that are found in what God truly declares to be his word, the word that he honors even above his name. And everybody seems to be losing in this because of the destruction that's taking place. Make no mistake about it. I think that Israel has the right to defend itself. I think that they have the right to basically go back and do whatever it takes to make sure nothing harmful comes out of Gaza again. I get that. I get all of that. But do you understand that Hamas is willing to allow themselves to be inserted into areas that would be regarded as civilian targets so that there would be a large casualty of innocent life so that they can go to the media and say, look at what the imperialist Jews are doing? That's what they're doing. That's what they want to do. They've been taught to win the media war like this. And when we talk about the battle and we talk about the things that are going on and all of the evil things that are happening, folks, all of this is absolutely reprehensible. It's all evil. So we have to talk about two things. The first question that we ask is who wins, right? We talk about Israel versus the Palestinians, or Israel versus the Arabs, or some people say Israel versus Islam. There's a lot of different ways people are saying things. But the issue is not that. If you want to get the answer to who is going to win this battle, if you want to know who wins this one, let me tell you who wins overall. The question really is, what actual battle is this? Okay, because I can tell you this right now. This is not Jews versus Arabs. Okay, this is not Palestinians versus Israelis. Okay, this is not Gaza versus the rest of Israel. This has nothing to do with any of that. And a lot of people are going to say that. And you can talk about all the geopolitics that tie to that. You can talk about Hamas, and you can talk about, Iran choosing all of these people to act as their functional proxies, which is very true. You could talk about the United States of America funding all of this and allowing it to happen. There's so much of this stuff that is to be discussed. And we're going to discuss all of that. We're going to talk about all of that. But here's the question. When you want to answer the question of who wins this war, you have to ask about what war it actually is. Because it's not any of the wars that I just mentioned. What this is all about is a battle between good and evil. It's a battle between righteousness and unrighteousness. And I can answer that question by simply telling you, God wins every time. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yes, the God of Ishmael. The God of all creation is the one who is going to win, not Allah, which, by the way, Allah is not a title. Allah is a name. Let's make ourselves very clear here. It speaks about a very specific being that is actually being worshipped by Islam. And the Quran even says that he himself is the chief of deceivers. That's what the Quran says. Folks, I'm not making it up. As a matter of fact, I will read it to you so that you can hear it coming out of my own mouth. This is what the Quran says, and I'm reading it to you word for word. It says this, وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَكَرِينَ, which basically means they deceived, indirectly referring to the Jews. So Allah deceived because what? Allah is the chief of deceivers. Well, let me tell you something. The true and living God, the God of all creation, does not lie. He's not a deceiver. And every word he gives us is true. Everything that comes out of his mouth is perfect and is unflawed and continues to go completely unchecked because he is the God of perfection. And he says that one day he is going to judge all unrighteousness. He says that one day the wages of sin is death, and it will eventually result in eternal death, not just simple physical death. It will be eternal death. Yet he has given us a way to be able to escape that punishment through the sacrifice of his son, Jesus Christ. Folks, that's the bigger issue that we have to talk about. This is the battle that's really raging on, the one between good and evil. Now, in the midst of all of this, understanding this, what's our obligation? Our obligation is to stand up for what's right. Our obligation is to speak the truth. Yes, as a Christian, am I one of God's chosen people? Darn straight I am. But I am not one of God's ancestrally chosen people. And when we talk about his ancestrally chosen people, we are talking about the Jews, and we have an obligation given to us by God to bless Israel. That's what the Bible tells us. And the reality of it is, if we are going to be people who follow the law of God, then of course we're going to seek to bless Arabs. We're going to seek to tell them the truth about Christ, just like we would do it with a Jew. But we cannot allow these actions to continue to be condoned. And folks, please just take it from a guy whose mom and dad is both born and raised in Egypt, and Arabic is my second language. Please, please, please let me beg you to really learn what's going on. Not through the eyes of the New York Times, not through the eyes of CNN, not from the mouths of a politician who speaks before the UN, and not before the eyes of anybody else who might give you a picture of what they think is their version of justice. What we do is we seek God with a whole heart. We look to him and we ask him for discernment and for understanding. And we say, God, open up my eyes and my heart to understand and know what is true, and help me to believe those words and follow them, because my life depends on it. It's really simple. Folks, the only one who wins here is the Lord. So my recommendation is that we learn how to be on his side. And yes, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for Israel. And pray for every life involved, that they would come to a saving knowledge of Christ, because that's where it really matters. That's some perspective for you, folks. Really important. By the way, I want to just say this because it is very, very important. We are talking about the things of the future, the things that we can expect to see in the future. Today, I'm starting in the book of Revelation, chapter 1. If you are watching this the day it's being aired, it's a Sunday morning. I would highly recommend that you go to my study on that subject. We are having fun as we get into that book. You're going to be blown away. God says a lot about what's going on in the future. And if you really want to learn the details of who's going to win, those details are right there. God bless you guys.